Welcome to this YSL Report Builder tutorial. In this video we're going to look at how to calculate various date parts. So the video is all about extracting intervals from full dates. We'll start with some simple examples to extract the day, the month and year using some built-in functions. And we'll do this in both Visual Basic in Report Builder and in an underlying SQL query. We'll then look at how to get the month and the day names rather than just the numbers, and then explain how to use the format function to return the name of pretty much any part of a date you can think of. We'll then move into looking at how you can calculate your own custom date intervals, such as weekends versus weekdays or decades rather than just years, and finish off with some practical advice about how to calculate financial or fiscal periods, whether that's financial months, quarters or years. We'll look at a few examples for how you can do that. So let's get started. I've started by creating a new report in Report Builder, and the very first thing I'd like to do in here is create a connection to the YSL Movies database. Just as a quick reminder, if you don't already have that installed, you can follow along with this video to help you get it set up, and you'll find a link in that video's description to download any required files. Assuming you've done that part already, I'll head back to my report data window, right-click on the data sources folder and choose to add a data source. I'll call the data source Movies as usual, and then I'll choose to use an embedded connection. Make sure the connection type is Microsoft SQL Server, and then rather than typing in the connection string, I'll click the Build button to help me construct it. I want to reference a local instance of SQL Server, so I can type in a shortcut to the local host, // and then the name of the instance of SQL Server I want to connect to, which is SQL 2017. Of course, yours might be different. Having done that, I should now be able to select my movies database from the drop-down list further down the dialog box. And when I've done that, I can click OK a couple of times, and there's my data source created. I'd like to use this now to create a data set. So I'm going to right-click on the data source and choose Add Data Set. I can then call the dataset Actors, which gives you a bit of a clue as to which table we're about to use. And rather than writing in my select statement in the query box, I'll use the query designer to help me build it quickly. I can expand the tables folder, followed by the actor table, and then I'm going to select the full name, the DOB and DOD columns. Having done that, I can click OK a couple of times, and that will populate my dataset. And then I'd like to create a simple table to show those results. I'll tidy up my report a little bit first by deleting this placeholder title text box, then right-click in the page footer and choose to remove that. I can then right-click in the report body and choose to insert a table, and then assign the 3 columns from my dataset to the 3 columns of the table, full name, DOB and DOD. Just to avoid the text rendering bug, which sometimes causes some of the text to be hidden when you run the report, I'm going to highlight all the cells in the table and then switch from the default font to any other, and then back to the default font. And then I'm going to change the width of the first column, do some basic formatting for the header cells, just to make them stand out a little bit. And I'd also like to format the date of birth and date of death columns. So I'm going to highlight those 2 cells in the details row, and then make sure that I can see the properties window by heading up to the view tab in the ribbon and choosing properties. And then I can find the number format property and type in a basic date format. So I'm going to go with a basic UK style date format, which is 2 digits for the day, so I'll type in 2 lowercase d's, followed by a / and then 2 digits for the month, so I'll type in 2 capital uppercase M's, followed by another / and then a 4-digit year, so I'll type in 4 lowercase y's. Having done that, I can quickly preview my report or run it to see what the results look like. And we should see a list of actor names followed by their dates of birth, and for those actors who are no longer with us, according to my database, a date of death possibly as well. Appreciate my database is a little out of date, so some of this information may not be quite accurate at this stage. So if you see any mistakes, it's just because I haven't updated the database yet. So that looks all right. Let's head back to the design view and start creating some calculations based on the date of birth and date of death columns. Probably the easiest set of values to calculate from a date is the number of the year, the number of the month, and the number of the day of the month. And there are 3 built-in functions that will help us to do that. So let's right-click on the actors dataset and choose to add a calculated field. I'll call this one YOB, short for year of birth, or YOB, and then I can click the FX button at the right hand side to launch the expression builder. If I look in the Common Functions category and go to the Date and Time category, I can head all the way down to the very bottom of the list to find the Year function. If I double click the Year function to insert it into the expression builder, you'll see that it requires a single parameter, just needs the value of a field which contains a date or date time. So I can go to my fields list then and double click the DOB function, DOB field, and then I can close the parentheses or the round brackets to complete the function, which should look like this. Having done that, I can click OK. And while we're here, let's add in another couple of columns to calculate the month of birth and day of the month. So let's add a new calculated field with the Add button. I'll call this next one MOB or MOB for month of birth. Hit the FX button again at the right hand side and head back to the Common Functions Date and Time category. If we've just used the Year function to calculate the year, it's no huge leap of the imagination to spot the Month function to calculate the month. And it works in fundamentally the same way. It requires a single date time value from which it can extract the number of the month. So I'll go for the month, head back to the fields list, double click DOB, and then close the parentheses. And again, a quick look at the function. That's what it should look like as an end result. One last one, let's click OK and then add a new calculated field. I'll call this one DMOB. I've already got one called DOB, so I don't want to replicate that. So DM, day of the month of birth. Click the FX button. And again, no huge leap of the imagination to predict the name of the function which calculates the day. It is indeed just called day. So Common Functions, Date and Time, and then I can double click the Day function. Head to the fields list, double click DOB, close the round brackets or parentheses, have a look at the results, there we go. And if I click OK a couple of times, those 3 new columns will be available. Let's just add them quickly to the table. If I drag these in from the fields list and attach those to the right hand side of the table, and then I can run the report just to get a quick look at what those results look like. So I've got the year in one column, the number of the month in the other, and then the day of the month in the final column. It's worth noting that those exact same 3 functions exist in SQL as well. So if you had the option, you may prefer to add the calculations to the underlying select statement of the dataset rather than add them as calculated fields later. Just to show you how that's done, let's right-click on the Actors dataset and choose Dataset Properties. I'll give myself an extra line just above the From clause, and then I'll add a new column by typing in a comma, and I'll calculate the year using the Year function. So year, open some parentheses. I can then refer to the Actor DOB column, and then I can assign an alias to that field by saying as, and then I'll call it YOB2. If you can think of a better, more inventive name than that, please feel free to use it. Let's add in the month function as well, so I can say month, and then in some parentheses, actor.dob, and I'll call this as mob2. And then similarly, we can use the day function to calculate the day of the month. So day, open some round brackets, actor.dob, close the round brackets, and assign an alias dmob2. Just a quick zoom in so you can see that a little more clearly. That's what the end results should look like. And then if I click OK, I'll find those 3 new columns added to the dataset. Rather than adding more columns to the table, I'm just going to change the existing field. So rather than showing YOB, I'm going to show YOB2. Rather than showing MOB, I'll go for MOB2, and then likewise DMOB2. Just to show that when I run the query, run the report, I get exactly the same results I've just seen calculated in SQL rather than in the Visual Basic language that we're using in calculated fields. One function we can use in Report Builder, which doesn't have a direct equivalent in SQL, is one which allows us to calculate the number of the day of the week. Let's add a new calculated field to our Actors dataset. I'll call this one DWOB, day of the week of birth, or DWOB if you wanted to pronounce it out loud. And then I can click the FX button to launch the expression builder, head back to the Common Functions category, date and time, scroll down towards the end of the list and go for the Weekday function. Just having a quick look at the example, the Weekday function actually has two parameters, so it's a little more complex than day, month and year. We need to reference a field containing a date time, but then we also should specify what day should be considered to be the first day of the week. Unless we specify otherwise, the first day of the week is considered to be Sunday. So let's say we wanted to set our first day of the week, the number 1 should show next to Monday instead. To make that work, I need to first of all head to the fields list and insert my DOB field, followed by a comma. And then if you're not sure how to reference the various different days of the week, then a nice reference for you in the Visual Basic Microsoft Online reference for the date and time weekday function, you can find the full list of available options by scrolling down the list to find this enumeration called first day of week. So relatively straightforward. If I wanted it to be Monday, I could enter first day of week dot Monday, or I could just use the number 2 instead, which is a little easier to type in, although a little less obvious if you were reading this back later on or showing it to somebody else. The number 2 is a little less meaningful than first day of week dot Monday. I quite like going for meaningful values when I write my formulae, so after my comma I'm going to type in first day of week dot Monday. I'll spell Monday correctly. It might have been easier just to copy and paste that from the online reference. If I then close the round brackets and hit OK, followed by OK again, and I'll add my new field to the end of my table, give the report a quick run, and then see what we end up with. So I guess we need to know whether these were correctly. So Tom Cruise was born on a Tuesday, apparently Sam Neill on a Sunday, and we'll find out if that's true shortly when we format these dates to show the name of the day of the month, the name of the month and the name of the day of the week. So just back to the design view for the time being, and let's look at how we could have achieved that same result using an SQL function instead. To get the equivalent value using SQL, we can use the datePart function. If I right-click my actors dataset and use dataset properties, we can add an extra column to the select list by adding a new line above the from clause, type in a comma, and then write in the datePart function. The datePart function can return a variety of intervals or units of time from a date, and the first thing we have to specify is which interval we're interested in. If you're not sure which options you can go for, then again, just like there's a function reference for the Weekday function, there's an equivalent reference page on the Microsoft Documents website for SQL for the datePart function. If I just scroll down the table a little bit, I'll find my list of possible options, quite a wide variety of things here. But what I want to do is find the day of the week, or weekday. So I can type this in either as weekday or as the abbreviation DW. Again, I think weekday is a little more meaningful, so that's what I'll type in. So I'll go for weekday, followed by a comma, and then the date from which I want to return that value. So that will be actor.dob. And I'll give this an alias as DWOB2. And just a quick little zoom there so you can see it a little more clearly. Having done that, I'm going to click OK. And then I'd like to compare these side by side. So I'm going to add this day of the week of birth 2 next door to the original day of the week of birth, run the report and see the comparison between the two. So you can see we've modified the first day of the week in our Visual Basic function to use Monday as the first day of the week, so the number 2 there referencing Tuesday, whereas for the day of the week of birth 2, this is still using Sunday as the first day of the week, so Tuesday is represented as the number 3. Now it is possible to modify the starting day or first day of the week in SQL, although it's a little more fiddly to do. If I head back to the design view and then just show you quickly again in the documentation, if I scroll down even further, there's a little section which explains how to change the first day of the week. You need to write a set statement before your select statement to set the first day of the week. So by default it's set to the number 7, so Sunday is considered the first day of the week. I want to set the first day of the week as the number 1, which would be Monday. It kind of begs the question why they number Monday as the number 1 and Sunday as the number 7, but treat Sunday as the first day of the week. But hey, I didn't create SQL, so I can't be to blame for that. Let's see how we can get this to work in our underlying query. Let's go back to the report data window and right-click the actors dataset and choose dataset properties. And then above the select statement, I'm going to write a set date first statement, followed by the number 1, which should set that to Monday. And if I spell set correctly, that would help. Set date first 1. Having done that, if I click OK and then run the report again, I will now see that I've got my SQL days of the week in line with the Visual Basic days of the week. So we've just used the DatePart function in SQL to calculate a specific interval of time, the day of the week. And it's worthwhile knowing that the same function exists in Visual Basic for Report Builder as well. So let's say we wanted to calculate the quarter that a date belongs to. There's no built-in quarter function, but we can use the DatePart function to calculate that. If we wanted to do it in SQL, that's nice and simple. If I go back to the documentation for the DatePart in SQL function, then I can find that I could use the word quarter or the abbreviations QQ or Q to get the number of the quarter that a date belongs to. And there's a similar option available for the DatePart function in Visual Basic. So if I just switch over to the Visual Basic documentation, if I look down the help page, I'll eventually hit the table which shows me the list of date time intervals I can use. So I can use either the date interval.quarter or just the abbreviation Q. Again, I'll go with the more descriptive method, dateinterval.quarter, so it's a little more readable. And then to make that work, if I go back to my report, right-click my actors dataset and add a calculated field. I'll call this one QOB, quarter of birth, and then hit the FX button at the right-hand side, head to the Common Functions category, Date and Time, and find the DatePart function. Again, you'll get a little bit of help here. In fact, the example that it's showing is showing exactly how to use DatePart to calculate the quarter. So I can either enter the letter Q in a pair of double quotes, or I can say dateinterval.quarter. So let's say DatePart, open some round brackets, dateinterval.quarter, followed by a comma, and then I want to reference the field from which I want to calculate that value. So once again, that's the actor's date of birth. I can then close the round brackets at the end, click OK again, add that field to my table, and then give the report a quick run just to check that it looks sensible. So I should return the numbers 1, 2, 3 or 4 according to which quarter of the year the actor was born in. Okay, I won't bother doing the exact equivalent in SQL because we've already used the DatePart function, and it would just be a case of modifying the interval that we've already used to calculate the day of the week. But you could do the exact equivalent in SQL as well if you liked. Now that we've calculated a few new values for the dates of births, it might be interesting to group our actors by things like the month they were born in and the day of the week they were born on. So rather than showing that in a simple table, I'm going to select and then move that table down my report page a little bit and replace that with a matrix. So I'm going to right click and insert a matrix towards the top of the report page. And I'd like to show the list of months down the left hand side in the rows group and the weekdays in the columns groups across the top. So for the rows box, I'm going to choose to view the month of birth. I can go with either MOB or MOB2, it doesn't really matter. And then for the columns group, I'm going to choose DWOB, so the one that I calculated in Visual Basic. Again, whether you use DWOB for the Visual Basic or the SQL equivalent really doesn't matter. What I'm then going to do is insert the full name field into the data cell. And what I'd like to do is find out how many actors were born in each combination of month and day of the week. So I want to apply a count function to the full name. I can select the full name placeholder and then right click on it, choose Summarize By, and then apply the count function to that. Just to avoid running into the font display bug again, I'm going to highlight all the cells in the matrix and then change the default font to any other, and then back to the original font, give the report a quick run, and then see down the left hand side I will end up with the numbers 1 through 12 representing the 12 months, across the top the 7 days of the week, and then inside each data cell the number of actors born on that day of the week in that month. So 18 people born on a Monday in January. A little bit of formatting would make that look a little more presentable, but what would really make it look more presentable is by showing the name of the month and the name of the day of the week. So a quick extra run here. What I'd like to do now is replace the numbers 1 through 12 with January through December and 1 through 7 with Monday through Sunday. So let's head back to the design view and look at how we can achieve that. Let's start by calculating the name of the month. So I'll right click on my actors dataset and choose Add Calculated Field. And then I'll call this new one MNOB, month name of birth. Hit the FX button, and then I have a variety of choices for how I can calculate the name of the month. I'll go with the standard approach. I'll go with the Common Functions Date and Time category, and then find the fairly obviously labelled MonthName function. The MonthName function requires a number between 1 and 12, and given a number it will return the name of the month representing that number. So for the example shown here, MonthName 10 would return the name October. There's actually a second optional parameter as well, which allows you to return abbreviated month names. So when that's set to true, rather than getting October, I would get Oct instead of the 3-letter abbreviation of the month name. If we omit that, we'll just get the full month name, and that's what I'd like to get. So I'm going to insert the MonthName function, and then I need to return the number of the month. So I could either insert the month function inside the MonthName function, so that would look like this, month, and then from the fields list, DOB, and then close 2 sets of round brackets. So there's an example of a nested function, so the the month function nested inside the MonthName function. Alternatively, as we've already calculated the number of the month, I'm going to strip off all of that back to the original open round bracket after MonthName, and we could just refer to a field which already contains the number of the month. So that's MOB. So I'll double click MOB and then close the round brackets, click OK a couple of times, and then I'm going to replace the MOB field in my matrix with the month name, or MNOB. Annoyingly, because that's a calculated field, the matrix thinks I want to aggregate that, which is a little bit irritating. So it's tried to sum the month name of birth, which makes no sense whatsoever. So I can click on the sum MNOB and then right click on it and choose Summarize By, and then just untick the sum. If I then run the report, I should now see, rather than numbers 1 through 12, January through December. It's important to note that the sorting of this is based on the original field that I added to the matrix. So just to show you what would have happened if I go back to the design view and then I insert a new matrix, I'm going to assign my month name field immediately. And then I'm going to go to the weekday or day of the week of birth, and then add the full name and apply a count. So just doing exactly the same things I did earlier on, just using the month name of birth rather than the original month of birth. Excuse me while I just avoid the font display bug. And just to show you that if I execute this one or run this report now, you'll see the sorting of this one is based on the sorting of the text returned by the MonthName function. So it's sorted alphabetically by month name, not chronologically by month number. It isn't a big deal. We can sort this out even if you've created a matrix which shows the month names alphabetically sorted. Back in the design view, if I select this matrix, go to the row groups panel and right click on the existing row group and choose to view its properties, I'll find that there's a sorting page on the left hand side, and rather than sorting it by month name of birth, I could just choose to sort it by month of birth instead. If I click OK and then run the report, I'll see that now it's sorted chronologically rather than alphabetically. Back to the design view, and I'm just going to delete that second matrix, and then we'll look at how we can calculate the name of the day of the week. Let's add a new calculated field to the actors dataset. We can right click, add calculated field. I will call this one DWNOB, so day of the week name of birth, and then hit the FX button, head to the Common Functions category, and again, while I have a range of choices for how I can do this, I'll stick with the standard approach for now, go to the Date and Time category and find the WeekdayName function. In a similar way to the MonthName function, WeekdayName requires a number, and it needs a number between 1 and 7, and from that it will calculate either the full day name, Monday, or the shortened month day name, Mon. So again, there's an optional parameter which allows you to specify whether to use abbreviated names. When it's set to true, you'll get the short name rather than the long name. Just like with the weekday function, there's an option to set the first day of the week. And again, by default, the first day of the week will be considered to be Sunday. So if we use nested functions, we don't have to worry about that too much. The simplest way to do this would be to insert the WeekdayName function first, and then insert the weekday function, and then refer directly to the original date field, actor's date of birth. And then if we closed two sets of round brackets, that will work perfectly well. If we wanted to reference the weekday number that we've already calculated, in that function we set the first day of the week to be a Monday. And if we wanted to use that value to calculate the name of the day of the week, what we would need to do is go back to the original weekday name, open round brackets, head to the fields list and insert the day of the week of birth, DWOB. Then we could type in a comma. And again, just looking back at the date and time category WeekdayName function for a little bit of help. The second parameter is whether or not you want to abbreviate the names. I don't, so I'm going to enter the word false to make sure I get the full weekday names, followed by a comma, and then I can reference what should be the first day of the week. So I'm going to say first day of week dot Monday. This one's probably easier than if we insert the weekday function inside the weekday name function, then we don't have to worry about what the first day of the week is because we're just trying to calculate the name. Anyway, having done that, let's click OK and click OK again. I can now insert the DWNOB function, or field I should say, into the top of the matrix to replace the DWOB. And again, annoyingly, it applies a sum to that, so I can select that, right-click on it, summarize by, and then just untick the sum. If I now run the report, I should find that I get Monday through Sunday. So it's a little bit easier to read a matrix like that when you've got nice descriptive names rather than just the numbers. If we want to calculate the name of the month and name of the day of the week in SQL, we don't have a direct equivalent for the MonthName and WeekdayName functions, but we do have a function called DateName, which allows us to calculate a piece of text for pretty much any interval of time we're interested in. It's a lot like the datePart function. So just to bring up the SQL documentation, there's a DateName function, and just like the datePart function in SQL allows you to calculate an interval of time according to the value you enter, and return a number, the DateName function allows you to use the same intervals, but to return the answer as a string of text. So we're going to use the month and the weekday intervals to get the name of the month and the name of the weekday. So back into the design view of the report, I'm going to right-click my actors dataset and choose dataset properties. And then I'm going to add in a new column above my from clause by adding a comma and saying date name, open some round brackets. I'll go with the month interval first, so month, comma, actor.dob, and I'll call this one as MNOB2, and then a new column using date name, open some round brackets, weekday, comma, actor.dob, and I'll call this one as DWNOB2. Marginally better than saying day of the week, name of birth to, I suppose. So that's what those two expressions should look like. Okay, having done that, I'm going to click OK. And then all I'm going to do is replace the existing MNOB and DWNOB fields in my matrix with the new ones I've just created. So MNOB2 and DWNOB2. Just to see that if I run the report, I get the exact same values displayed, whether I use the SQL version or the Visual Basic version. So we've used a variety of functions so far to return various intervals from our dates. Some are returned as numbers like day, month, year and quarter, and some are returned as strings of text like DateName and the MonthName and WeekdayName functions. Now, if it was text that you wanted to return, then there's probably a slightly easier way to do this for both SQL and Visual Basic if you didn't want to have to learn all the various functions available. Both SQL and Visual Basic have a function called format, which allows you to apply a specific format code to any numeric or indeed date time value. So here's the documentation for the format function in SQL. You enter a value followed by the format you want to apply to it, and that includes date and time codes, as the examples show here. There are many more examples further down the page. And there's an equivalent function in Visual Basic where you enter the value you want to format and then enter the style of formatting you want to apply. And there are many examples on this page as well, not just for dates and times, but for numbers as well. Just to have a very brief look as to how those work in both Visual Basic and SQL, let's head back to the design view of our report. And I'm going to add a calculated field first of all, which will be called full DOB. And then hit the FX button on the right hand side to construct my own custom date format. So I'll go to the common functions category. You'll find this function in the text category. It's called format. There's also a specific one in Visual Basic for formatting dates and times, but format is a little more flexible. So I'm going to double click the format function. I'll head to the fields list, double click DOB, followed by a comma, and then I can enter my date style or my format code inside a set of double quotes. So I use a combination of D's, M's and Y's to format my dates. Imagine that it was the first of the month. If I typed in the letter D, it would return the number 1 as a piece of text, I should say, not the literal number. It's returned as a string value always. If I typed in 2 D's, it would return 0, 1. If it was a Monday and I typed in 3 D's, it would return Mon, and 4 D's would give me Monday. I can then type in a space, so I'm going to go with Monday, followed by a single D, so that would be Monday 1, followed by another space, and then capital M's for months. Again, if it was January, a single M would return the number 1, 2 M's would be 0, 1, 3 M's would be Jan, and 4 M's would be January. If I typed in a space then, I can either go for 2 or 4 Y's, depending on whether I want the year without the century or the year with the century. So I'll go with the century. And then I can close the double quotes, close the round brackets, hit OK and OK again. And I'm just going to drag this full DOB field next door to the DOB field in the table. And then run the report, just have a quick look at what that results in. So you see it's a complete full descriptive day of birth for each actor. To do the same thing in SQL is almost identical. Back in the design view, I can go back to my actors dataset and view the dataset properties. I can use the format function to create a new column. So add a comma, format, open some round brackets, start with the thing you want to format, which will be actor.dob, followed by a comma, and then enter the format string. It's just that this time the format string is entered in single quotes rather than double quotes. So I'll go with the same style again. I'll go with 4 lowercase d's, a space, another single lowercase d, 4 uppercase m's, and 4 lowercase y's. Close the single quotes, close the round brackets as full DOB2. And then again, a quick little zoom in there so you can see it's almost identical to the equivalent in Visual Basic. If I click OK, and then I'm just going to replace the full DOB with full DOB2 rather than add even more columns to the table, run the report, and I'll see the same results. So there you go, the format function is a shortcut to getting different bits of time or different bits of dates from a date. Of course, we didn't need to do the entire thing. We just wanted the name of the day of the week. We could have just used a format code of 4 Ds. If we wanted the name of the month, we could have just used 4 uppercase M's. So you don't have to get a full date. You can mix and match those format codes to whatever style you like. As well as using the built-in functions to calculate standard units of time, such as day, month, year, etc., you can also divide dates up into your own custom categories. So let's say, for example, I want to see a matrix which shows me how many people were born in each decade on weekdays or weekends. There aren't any built-in functions that will divide dates up in that way, but we can create our own using a combination of other functions. So let's work out whether a date belongs to a weekday or a weekend. I'm going to right-click my actors dataset and choose Add Calculated Field, and I'll create a new column called WE or WD, weekend or weekday. I can then click the FX button to launch the expression builder. I'm going to base this expression on using the if function. I'm going to check that if the day of the week was less than 6, assuming Monday is the number 1, then I know that the date is on a weekday. Otherwise, it must be on a weekend. So to make that work, I can go to the Common Functions category and then Program Flow, double-click the if function. I can then either calculate the weekday again using the date and time category, or if I already have a field which contains the day of the week, I can simply reference it here. So I'm going to go to Fields, Actors, DWOB, Day of the Week of Birth. I know that I calculated that using the basis of 1 being Monday, that Monday was the first day of the week. So as long as that number is less than 6, I know that it must be a weekday. So less than 6 followed by a comma, and then in some double quotes I can type in the description weekday. I can then type in another comma and then I can enter the word weekend. So if it was not less than 6, then it must be a weekend. If I close the round brackets at the end, that's the final function or the final expression. And then if I hit OK and OK again, I can then insert a basic matrix into the report. I'll put the weekend or weekday field in the columns area. So I'm going to select that field for the columns area. And then in the data area, I'm going to select the full name of the actor. And then I want to apply a count function to that. So I can select it, right click on it, summarize by count. I'll leave the rows box empty for now as I haven't calculated anything for it yet. But if I highlight and then modify the font so I don't run into this display bug, and then switch back to the original font, do a bit of very basic formatting for the row and column headers just to make those stand out. And even at this point, if I run the report, I should end up with a number of people born on weekdays and a number of people born on weekends. So that part's working fine so far. To calculate the decade of birth, we'll take a slightly different approach. We'll take the first 3 digits from somebody's year of birth, and then add to the end of that the digit 0 and the letter S. So for example, somebody born in 1985 will take the first 3 digits of the year, 198, and then add 0S, so they will be born in the 1980s. So let's add a new calculated column to the actors dataset. We'll right click and add calculated field. I'll call this one DEOB, decade of birth, and then click the FX button at the right hand side. I'm going to rely on using some text functions for this, or at least one text function to return the first 3 digits from the year. So from the Common Functions category, I can go to the Text category and then find the left function. You can see the example here shows you passing in a field value and then the number of characters you want to return from the left of that. If I double click the left function, I can then head back to my fields list and I can go for my existing year of birth field. So I can go YOB. I can then type in a comma and then enter the number of 3, followed by closing the round brackets to get the first 3 digits. Now I'd like to concatenate to the end of that the specific string 0s. So in Visual Basic I can concatenate using the ampersand and then in some double quotes 0s and then close the double quotes. Having done that, if I click OK and then click OK again, I can now add the DEOB field to my matrix. Now when I run this one, there's a small little issue because there's one person in this database who does not actually have a date of birth. So we've actually got a decade that says tens. When there is no date of birth for an actor, then the year of birth or the year function calculates the number 1. So an empty date, nothing date, returns a year of 1. So that's why I've got 1 attached to 0s. We should probably eliminate that, shouldn't we? We should check whether the date of birth is nothing in the first place. For everybody else, it's worked quite well. So you can see which is the most popular decade. Looks like the 1960s for weekdays. We could apply some sorting to prove that, but let's focus on getting rid of this rogue category here, the tens. Let's head back to the design view. One way to do this would be to eliminate that person from the dataset in the first place. We could filter this for nulls. We can add a where clause to get rid of any dates of births that were null. But let's try modifying our decade of birth calculation. We can right-click that and choose Field Properties. I can then click back on the FX button next to DEOB. And before the left function, I want to check if the date of birth is nothing, then return the phrase unknown, for example. So let's add an if function, IIF, open some parentheses or round brackets. Then there's two ways to test for whether something is nothing. I'll go with the is nothing function. So is nothing, open some round brackets. By the way, of course, you be using the common functions category. So program flow for if, inspection for is nothing. And then after the is nothing function, just inside the round brackets, I'm going to check for the DOB field. I can then close a set of round brackets, followed by a comma, and say that if that was true, if there was no date of birth, return the phrase unknown, so the word unknown in some double quotes, followed by another comma, and then I simply need to close the set of round brackets at the end. So as long as the date of birth is not nothing, it will perform that calculation. So having done that, I can click OK and OK again, and then if I run the report again, we should now see that rather than having a tens, we have an unknown category. So that works quite nicely. As ever, we can replicate those same calculations in SQL. If I right-click on the actors dataset and choose dataset properties, and then I can add a new column just above the from clause. To calculate the weekend or weekday, we can do this in a very similar way. It's just that we can't reference an existing column in our select list, so we have to resort to nesting functions here. So let's have a go at this. I'm going to say if IIF, open some parentheses. Then I'm just going to quickly copy and paste the calculation I've already made to calculate the day of the week of birth using the date part function. Because we've set date first 1, I know that Monday is the first day of the week. So if that is less than 6, I want to return the word weekday. The only difference here really compared to the Visual Basic version is that the text must be in single quotes, not double quotes. So weekday in single quotes, followed by a comma, and otherwise it will be weekend. So close the single quotes and then close the round brackets. I'll give that a quick alias as, and then that will be WE or WD2. Doing the same thing to calculate the decade of birth, so I can add a new column. This time I'm going to use the DateName function to return the year, and then I want to extract the first 3 digits from there. The reason I'm going to use the DateName function is because that it always returns a string of text rather than a number. SQL is a little more fussy about data types. So Visual Basic is quite happy to change text into numbers and numbers into text according to the calculation you're performing. SQL is a little fussier about it. So I want to make sure I'm sticking with text. I'll use the left function first, and then I'll open up some round brackets, and then I will use the DateName function to get the year from the actor's date of birth, so year, comma, actor, .dob. Then I can close the round brackets for the year for the DateName function, and then type in a comma and say I would like to get 3 digits from the left-hand side. I'll then close the round brackets for the left function, and then to concatenate in SQL, I add one bit of text to another. There's also a function that will do this called concat, but this will do for now. So I'm going to add, and then I'm going to, in some single quotes, type in the digit 0 and the letter S, close the single quotes, and say as DEOB2. Again, I haven't yet handled the null value, so the one actor with a missing date of birth, but I'm going to click OK at this point. And then I'm going to replace my DEOB with DEOB2 and WE or WD with WE or WD2. And then having done that, let's run the report and see what happens. We'll get the exact same results as we got previously. It's just this time, rather than having the word unknown, we have an empty or a null or a nothing for the final category. Again, we could replace that using an if function in SQL, checking if the DOB is null rather than is nothing. But I think we've probably seen enough there for you to be able to work that part out. So there we go, dividing dates into custom categories using a variety of other functions. Once you realise that you can do this sort of thing, create essentially your own labels to refer to any given date, it really helps when you want to do more serious things such as calculate financial or fiscal periods. So let's say we wanted to calculate the fiscal month and quarter and year in which any of our actors were born. We can already calculate the chronological versions of those values. So we've got the chronological month calculated. We just need to use a little bit of basic logic to adjust the month number by adding or subtracting to or from it. So let's add a financial or fiscal month column. I'm going to right click actors and choose add calculated field, and I'll call this one FMOB, financial or fiscal month of birth. If I hit the FX button, I can launch the expression builder. And basically what I would like to do is check if the chronological month is less than 4, so if it's between 1 and 3, then I want to add 9 to the chronological month. Otherwise, I want to subtract 3 from the chronological month. So imagine I was in April, chronologically, that's month number 4. And if I subtract 3 from that, that returns the number 1. So I'm in fiscal period number 1. If I was in March, that is less than 4. And if I add 9 to March, or 3, then I return 12. So that's the last financial month. So nothing particularly complicated about it. I'll use an if function. I'll just type it in, IIF, open some round brackets. And then I can either nest the month function or reference an existing field in which I've calculated month already. I'll go to my calculated field, month of birth, or MOB, and check if that is less than 4. Follow that with a comma, and then I want to add 9 to the month of birth that I've already calculated to calculate the fiscal month. Follow that with another comma, and otherwise I wanted to subtract 3. So I will double click month of birth again and then subtract 3 from it. Close the round brackets. So there's nothing particularly complicated here. It's just adjusting with a bit of basic arithmetic what number is generated for the month. If I click OK and OK again, I can add my fmob function. I'll drop that into my table just next to the existing month of birth. Give that a quick run just to check what results we get. And there we go, we can compare. So Tom Cruise born in July, which is chronologically month number 7, but financially is month number 4. A slightly easy one to find if I find, let's see, somebody born in April, so Kirsten Dunst, born in April, but financially she's born in month number 1. So that all looks like that's working quite nicely indeed. Okay, back to the design view. Let's do something similar to calculate the quarter. Now I've already got a calculation for the quarter of birth, so let's use similar arithmetic to adjust that quarter to a financial quarter. If I right click the actors dataset and add a calculated field, I'll call this FQOB and then hit the FX button to launch the expression builder. Again, a nice simple if function. If open some round brackets, and I'll refer to my existing field called QOB. Otherwise I could calculate it again using the date part function as we did earlier in the video. But as I already have it calculated, I'll use it and check if I am in quarter number 1. If so, I know that I wanted to add 3 because January, February, March would be in quarter 4 financially. So I'm going to type in a comma, reference the quarter of birth field again, and then add 3 to it. Otherwise, I wanted to simply subtract 1 from the existing quarter of birth. So I'm going to double click the quarter of birth function again, or field again, and then subtract 1 from it. Okay, I can then close the parentheses, click OK and OK again, and I'll find where I've dropped my existing quarter and drag the financial or fiscal quarter to the right hand side of that. Give the report a quick test just to see if it's adjusted in the appropriate way. So again, if I was in quarter number 1 chronologically, so that's in February, I'm now in quarter number 4 fiscally. So that all looks like that's working pretty well as well. Okay, so there's the basics of adjusting the month and the quarter to fiscal periods. Obviously the numbers, if you don't end your year in March or begin in April, then you may need to adjust the numbers you're using to calculate, but that's relatively straightforward stuff, just a bit of basic arithmetic. The logic of calculating a fiscal year is essentially the same as we've just done for the fiscal month and quarter. It may just require a little more effort to calculate the final label or descriptor. So let's say, for example, somebody was born in January 1985. I would like their financial year value to return as FY84/85. If they were born from April 1985, I would like their financial year to read as FY85/86. So, same logic. If they were born before April, then we need to create one result. Otherwise, we need to create another. It's just concatenating those values to make them readable. So let's add one final column. I'm going to right-click Actors and add Calculated Field. I will add in an FYOB, financial year of birth or fiscal year of birth. Click FX and then again begin with an if function IIF, open some round brackets, which checks whether the month of birth is less than 4. Follow that with a comma. Now what I would like to do is calculate the year of the preceding year, if that makes sense. So I want to use the year function and then subtract 1 from it. So I can either use my existing year of birth field, or I can use the year function to calculate the year of the current date of birth and then subtract 1 from it. This case, I'm going to use the YOB field. Why not? So I'm going to use YOB and then subtract 1. Now, if I was born in 1985, then the year of birth field has the number 1985 in it. And I actually want to return just the 85 portion. So I can do this in a couple of ways. I've got 1985 minus 1, so I currently have 1984. And if I want to return just the final 2 digits from that, I could use a right function. So I'm going to use the right function, the opposite of the left function we used earlier on, to calculate the decade. So right, field's YOB value minus 1, comma, 2, to get the 2 rightmost characters from that string. I can then close the round brackets. Then what I would like to do is concatenate that with a / character. So I'm going to use an ampersand and then use a / character in some double quotes, and then concatenate that with the current year of birth. So I'll just refer to the YOB field. So again, logically, if I was born in January 1985, this part would return 84, followed by / and then this would return 1985. So again, I want to pass that into the right function to return just the 2 rightmost digits from there. So right fields YOB.value, comma 2. Okay, so that's the expression for somebody born in the last quarter, between January and March. For somebody born from April onwards, if I type in a comma, then the expression here is, well, it's going to concatenate the 2 rightmost digits from their year of birth. So again, thinking about if I was born in April 1985, this would give me 85. Then I'd like to concatenate a / character and concatenate that with the last 2 digits of the year next year. So I'm going to copy and paste right fields yob.value -1, 2. So I'll take that and place that at the end of my calculation. Just change the width of my dialog box to try to get everything onto one single page. And then on one single line, I should say. And then rather than subtracting 1, I would like to add 1. Okay, I need to close one more set of round brackets now to close off my if function. So as we said, it's a little more complicated to construct the final label, but the logic is still the same. All I would like to do to make this entire thing look a little bit neater is I'd like to add the letters FY to the beginning of the string. So just after the equal sign, before the if function, in some double quotes, I'm going to type in the letters FY, close the double quotes, and then use an ampersand to concatenate that to the rest of the calculation. Okay, so it's, as I say, a little more complicated, but the logic is still the same. Let's click OK and OK again, and I'm just going to drop this financial year of birth field into my table next to year of birth. Give the report a quick run, see if I've made any mistakes. Hooray, I haven't. So there we go. So somebody born in July 1962 is in financial year 62 to 63. Somebody born in September 47 is 47 to 48. Somebody born in February 67, so in quarter 1, is financial year 66 to 67. So that's all working pretty nicely. You can use that label now to group your fields, to create charts, etc., etc. Slightly more complex example to finish on. I'm not going to bother replicating that in SQL, though we could. The logic would be the exact same. So there we go, some example functions for calculating various different data intervals and making use of those in tables and matrices. Hope you found all that useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.